The morning sun rose over the hills of New Eden Colony, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. Governor Richard Clark stood at the large window of the administration building, admiring the view of the settlement that had grown so much in just 5 years. 2,300,000 people now called this frontier planet home. Farmers were already in their fields and children walked to school along tree-lined paths. It was everything humanity hoped for when they began to reach for the stars. "Governor, the agricultural report you asked for," said his assistant, handing him a tablet. "Thank you, Carol," Richard replied, smiling as he glanced at the numbers. Crop yields were up 15% from last year. New Eden was thriving. The first explosion came without warning. A blinding flash of light from the southern district turned day to night as a massive shockwave raced across the colony. The administration building shook, and Richard was thrown to the floor. "What was that?" Carol screamed, crawling toward him, as alarms began to blare throughout the building. Richard pulled himself up and stared in horror as more explosions erupted across the colony. Through the window, he saw strange ships with sharp, angled hulls descending from the sky. They were like nothing he had ever seen before, not human design. "Get to the emergency shelter," he ordered Carol, then ran to the communications room. The colony's defense coordinator, Sam Harris, was already there, frantically working the controls. "Governor, we're under attack by unknown vessels. They're not responding to any communication attempts," Sam said, his face pale with shock. "Our defense systems are barely making a dent in their shields." Richard pushed a button on the console. "This is Governor Richard Clark of New Eden Colony. We are under attack by unknown alien forces. This is an emergency distress call to all UESC ships in range. We need immediate assistance. I repeat, we are under attack." Another explosion rocked the building, closer this time. The lights flickered and dust fell from the ceiling. "We've lost contact with the Eastern District," Sam reported. "Complete destruction. They're systematically targeting population centers." Richard's hands trembled as he continued broadcasting. "The attackers are using advanced energy weapons. Our defenses are ineffective. Please send all available help. There are over 2 million civilians here." In orbit above New Eden, Lieutenant Susan Miller watched in horror from her small outpost station. The defense outpost was little more than an early warning system, with a crew of 12. They had no weapons capable of stopping what was happening below. "Lieutenant, what are our orders?" asked Ensign Frank Morris, his young face showing the terror they all felt. Susan made the hardest decision of her life. "We can't stop this. Our orders are to record everything and get the information back to Earth Command." Her voice cracked. "Prepare the scout ship for immediate departure." On the monitors, they watched as alien vessels methodically destroyed the colony. The aliens weren't just attacking, they were exterminating. Block by block, district by district, the colony was being erased. "But the colonists," Frank protested, "we can't help them by dying here," Susan said, though the words tasted bitter. "Our duty now is to make sure Earth knows what happened and who did it." As the crew rushed to the hangar bay, Susan downloaded all sensor data from the outpost systems to a secure drive. The attackers hadn't seemed to notice their small station yet, focused as they were on the colony below. The scout ship, barely larger than a shuttle, powered up its engines. Through the viewport, Susan watched as New Eden burned. The governor's transmission had gone silent minutes ago. As they pulled away from the station, their sensors captured clear images of the alien vessels. They were biomechanical in appearance, with strange growth-like structures protruding from their hulls. Susan counted at least 30 ships. "Setting course for the jump point," Frank said, his hands steady despite everything. "We should reach Earth in 3 weeks at maximum speed." Susan nodded, unable to tear her eyes from the devastation below. "Whoever they are, they'll pay for this." 3 weeks later, in a secure conference room deep within Earth's defense headquarters, Admiral John Peterson watched the recorded footage with growing horror. Around the table sat the 12 members of the military council, their faces grim, in the blue light of the projection. 2,300,000 civilians, the Admiral said quietly when the recording ended. Wiped out without provocation or warning. Lieutenant Miller stood at attention at the end of the table, Her journey back had been a nightmare of guilt and grief. The aliens made no attempt at communication, sir. They appeared to be deliberately targeting civilian areas first, then infrastructure. It was systematic. Do we have any idea who they are? Asked General Mary Winters. Nothing in our records matches their ship design, Peterson replied. They're completely unknown to us. In the silence that followed, a communications officer entered and handed Peterson a message. The admiral read it, then looked up at the bow gathering. The president has declared a level 1 emergency. All colonial governments have been notified. As of this moment, we are at war. In a research lab across the city, Dr. Alan Wright watched the emergency broadcast with growing dread. His hands gripped the edge of his desk so hard his knuckles turned white. No, please no, he whispered, as the names of the confirmed dead began to scroll across the bottom of the screen. When he saw the names of his brother's family, all residents of New Eden, the world seemed to stop. Alan had argued against his brother moving to the colony, worried about the risks of frontier life. But he never imagined this. Never this. The broadcast switched to the president's address. Today, humanity faced its darkest hour since the unification. The unprovoked attack on New Eden Colony has made one thing clear. We are not alone in this universe, and not all who dwell among the stars seek peace. Alan barely heard the rest of the speech. His mind was already racing through his research projects. Advanced propulsion systems, new alloy compositions, theoretical weapons designs that the Defense Department had deemed too expensive to develop. I'll give them expensive, he muttered, wiping tears from his face as he began pulling up files on his computer. His grief was crystallizing into something harder, more focused. Across Earth and throughout the 32 human colonies, the news spread like wildfire. Impromptu memorials appeared in city squares. Military recruitment centers were suddenly overwhelmed. Factory owners contacted the government, offering to convert production lines to military needs. In the headquarters of the Titan shipyards orbiting Mars, CEO Laura Cole stood before her board of directors. Gentlemen, ladies, as of this morning, we are no longer in the business of building colony ships. Every dock, every fabricator, every worker will be redirected to military production. The Defense Department has already sent specifications. On the colony world of Proxima Centauri B, miners rioted when they learned their critical resources were being nationalized for the war effort, until they saw the footage from New Eden. The riots turned into volunteer drives overnight. Admiral Peterson stood at the window of his office, looking out at the sprawling defense headquarters complex. Across the lawn he could see people, civilians placing flowers at the hastily constructed New Eden Memorial. They think they destroyed one colony, he said quietly. Instead, they united all of humanity. He turned back to his desk, where plans for the largest military mobilization in human history were taking shape. Operation Retribution had begun. 6 weeks after the attack on New Eden, representatives from Earth and all 32 colonies gathered in the Grand Assembly Hall of the United Earth Space Command. The room buzzed with tension as Governor Jane Martinez of the Mars colony took the podium. We have argued about taxes and resources for decades, she said, her voice carrying to every corner of the massive chamber. Today we put aside those differences. Today we are not Martians or Europans or Earthers. We are humans, and we face an enemy who would destroy us all. The Defense Accord was signed by all 33 human governments within an hour. It was the fastest major political agreement in human history. Admiral John Peterson watched from the side of the stage. He had slept only a few hours each night since the attack, working tirelessly to prepare humanity's response. When the final signature was added to the document, the assembly turned to him and began to applaud. The sound was deafening. The newly formed War Council met immediately after the ceremony. Admiral Peterson was officially named Supreme Commander of the Human Defense Fleet. Lieutenant Miller, step forward, Peterson said during the meeting. Susan Miller, still haunted by what she had witnessed at New Eden, approached the council table. Your quick thinking preserved critical intelligence that we need for this fight. You are hereby promoted to commander. You will lead our new intelligence division focused on understanding our enemy. Susan saluted sharply. I won't let you down. Sir. What are we calling them? Asked General Winters. The enemy. Commander Miller brought up the holographic images she had captured. The colonists on New Eden were sending messages about the attack in their final moments. Several of them mentioned hearing strange clicking sounds over their comm systems before the ships appeared. Based on this, we've designated them as the Krell. In his laboratory at the Defense Research Center, Dr. Alan Wright had not left the building in weeks. His workspace was cluttered with design schematics and prototype components. When the door opened, he barely looked up. Dr. Wright, I'm Commander Miller. Admiral Peterson sent me. Alan finally turned. Commander, I've been expecting someone. The designs I've sent to the Admiral are revolutionary, Susan finished. That's why I'm here. The Admiral wants your weapons research integrated into the fleet immediately. Alan nodded, his eyes red from lack of sleep. I've improved the energy efficiency of our shield systems by 40%, and the new targeting system can lock on to the unique hull composition of the Krell ships. How soon can it be ready for production? It already is. I just need the factories. Across the solar system, humanity's industrial capacity shifted to a war footing. The massive Titan shipyards above Mars, originally built to construct colony ships, were converted for military production. Dormant shipyards around Jupiter and Saturn, remnants from the old Earth conflicts, were reactivated. Laura Cole stood in the control center of the Titan shipyards, watching as thousands of workers swarmed over the skeletal frames of warships. Where once a single colony ship might take a year to build, now they were assembling cruisers at a rate of 3 per day. Ms. Cole, the new production quota from Admiral Peterson, her assistant said, handing her a tablet. Laura's eyes widened as she read the numbers. This can't be right. They want us to increase output by 300%? The Admiral said to tell you that's just the beginning. On Earth, military training centers operated around the clock. Men and women from all walks of life volunteered, in numbers that overwhelmed the system. New training facilities were built on the moon to accommodate the flood of recruits. 6 months after the attack, Admiral Peterson called a meeting of his senior staff. The holographic display in the center of the room showed a massive fleet of ships. Operation Retribution is ahead of schedule, he announced. The first wave of 50,000 ships will be ready within the month. The room fell silent. Before the attack on New Eden, the combined human fleet had numbered less than 1,000 vessels. 50,000? General Winters asked. That's impossible. Nothing is impossible now, Peterson replied. Not with what's at stake. Commander Miller stepped forward. Sir, my team has analyzed all available data on the Krell. We believe their attack on New Eden was a test, a way to gauge our military capability before a larger invasion. Then we'll show them exactly what we're capable of, Peterson said, grimly. Commander, your recommendation for first strike? Susan highlighted a star system on the edge of human space. Here. Our probes have detected unusual energy signatures consistent with Krell technology. It's likely a forward base or staging area. Meanwhile, Dr. Wright supervised the installation of his new weapon systems on the flagship of the fleet, the UES Vindicator. The massive dreadnought was nearly 2 kilometers long, bristling with weapon emplacements. The targeting system needs to be calibrated precisely, he instructed the engineering team. We've only got one chance to get this right. As he worked, a young engineer approached him. Dr. Wright, I just wanted to say, my cousin lived on New Eden. Thank you for what you're doing. Alan nodded silently. The weight of 2 million lives drove everything he did now. 1 year after the destruction of New Eden, the first human offensive launched. 100,000 warships, twice the original estimate, jumped into the target system. It was the largest coordinated fleet action in the history of humanity. Admiral Peterson stood on the bridge of the Vindicator, watching as his ships took formation. Send the message to all ships. Operation Retribution is now active. In the intelligence center 1 deck below, Commander Miller coordinated with scout ships as they spread throughout the system. Contact, multiple Krell vessels detected near the fourth planet. The Krell ships, caught by surprise, scrambled to form a defensive line. There were perhaps 200 of them, a significant force by the standards of a year ago, but now hopelessly outnumbered. They don't understand what they've awakened, Peterson said quietly. All ships advance by battle groups. Show them what happens when you attack humanity. The human fleet moved forward like a tidal wave of metal and energy. When the Krell fired their first shots, they encountered the enhanced shields designed by Dr. Wright. Their weapons, so devastating against the undefended colony, barely dented the warships. Return fire, Peterson ordered. Thousands of energy beams lanced out from the human fleet, guided by Wright's targeting systems. The Krell shields flared briefly, then failed. Their ships began to explode one after another. From her station, Susan watched the battle unfold. "Sir, we're picking up unusual communications from the Krell ships. They appear to be panicking." Peterson's expression remained cold. "Good. This is just the beginning. Have the science vessels collect all debris for analysis. I want to know everything about their technology." As the last Krell ship in the system was destroyed, a cheer went up throughout the fleet. It was humanity's first victory, a small measure of justice for New Eden. In his private quarters later, Admiral Peterson studied the reports from the battle. The Krell had been completely unprepared for the scale and technology of the human response. But this was just one small outpost. Intelligence suggested their empire was vast, spanning hundreds of systems. "One down," he murmured. "Many more to go." On a production monitor in his office, the number of completed warships ticked upward relentlessly. 100,000 had been just the first wave. The factories across human space were just hitting their stride. The real response was yet to come. 1 year after their first victory, human ships pushed deeper into Krell space. The scout ship Eagle moved silently through the darkness, its advanced stealth systems hiding it from enemy sensors. Commander Susan Miller stood on the bridge watching the stars drift by as they approached their target. "Any sign of patrol ships?" she asked her sensor officer. "None, Commander. The area appears clear." Susan nodded. Intelligence gathering had become her life since the war began. What they discovered on this mission could change everything about how they fought the Krell. "Take us in closer to the planet," she ordered. "Passive scans only." The green world grew larger on their view screen. Unlike many Krell-controlled planets, this one showed signs of extensive civilization, cities, transportation networks, orbiting, stations. "That's strange," Susan said, studying the readings. "These energy signatures don't match typical Krell technology." Her communications officer suddenly straightened in his chair. "Commander, I'm picking up transmissions from the surface. They're not using Krell communication protocols." Susan moved to his station. "Can you decode it?" "Working on it now. It's not Krell language. This is something else entirely." Hours later, as the Eagle hid in the shadow of one of the planet's moons, Susan compiled her report for Admiral Peterson. The evidence was clear. The beings on the planet were not Krell. They were another species entirely, apparently subjugated by the Krell. "The Krell aren't just a species," she said into her recorder. "They're an empire of conquered worlds, and based on the communications we've intercepted, the species on this planet are being forced to build ships and weapons for the Krell war effort." Back at the main fleet, Admiral Peterson received Susan's report while standing on the bridge of the Vindicator. The massive flagship now led a force of over 300,000 warships, and more arrived every day from human shipyards. "So we're not just fighting the Krell," he said, addressing his senior staff. "We're fighting an empire of multiple species, all under Krell control." "That could work to our advantage," General Winters suggested. "These conquered species might become allies if we can free them." Peterson nodded slowly. "Commander Miller, your new mission is to make contact with these beings, see if they can be turned against their masters." On Earth, Dr. Alan Wright worked tirelessly in his lab. The data collected from destroyed Krell ships had yielded important discoveries. He now stood before a group of military scientists, explaining his findings. The Krell ships we've encountered so far are actually piloted by various subject species, he explained, showing detailed scans. But we've found evidence of different ships, more advanced ones, that we believe are controlled by the Krell leadership themselves. He brought up a new image showing a strange organic-looking vessel. These ships have a unique energy signature. I believe they're piloted by what the subject species call the Architects, the true Krell ruling class. Can we target them specifically? Asked one of the scientists. Alan smiled grimly. That's exactly what I've been working on. 3 months later, Commander Miller's ship approached a secret meeting point deep in contested space. Her mission to contact the subjugated species had been successful beyond expectations. A small vessel awaited them, piloted by beings that called themselves the Voran. The Voran representative, a tall, gray-skinned humanoid named Krell, came aboard the Eagle under strict security protocols. For centuries, my people have served the Architects, Sev explained through a translation device. We build their ships, maintain their stations, fight their wars. But many of us have worked in secret to resist them. Why do they call themselves the Krell? Susan asked. They don't. That is what we call them in our language. It means the Devourers. They consume everything, resources, worlds, species. They keep only what is useful to them. Why did they attack our colony? Zev's large eyes blinked slowly. The Architects study new species before deciding whether to conquer or destroy them. Your colony was a test. They did not expect your response. And what do they expect now? They are gathering their forces. The Architects have ruled 1,000 worlds for millennia. They will not surrender easily. Susan sent the information immediately to Admiral Peterson. The Admiral called an emergency meeting of the War Council to plan their next move. The Architects are gathering their main fleet at a system the Voran call Proxima Relay, Peterson explained. According to our new allies, it's a major transportation hub connecting their core worlds. How many ships? General Winters asked. At least 50,000, with more arriving daily. The room fell silent. It would be the largest battle of the war so far. We strike first, Peterson decided. We'll take 350,000 ships, everything we have ready. Dr. Wright, now a permanent advisor to the council, spoke up. My new targeting system is ready. It's specifically designed to identify and disable Architect vessels. Get it installed on every ship, Peterson ordered. We move in 2 weeks. Across human space, the news spread. Every ship not absolutely essential to defense was recalled for the assault. Training schedules were accelerated. Ammunition factories worked around the clock. On the day of the battle, Admiral Peterson stood on the bridge of the Vindicator and watched as his fleet assembled. Ships stretched as far as the eye could see. Destroyers, cruisers, dreadnoughts, carriers with their swarms of fighter craft. All ships report ready, Admiral, his executive officer announced. Peterson nodded. Send the signal. Jump when ready. 350,000 human warships vanished into jump points, reappearing moments later in the Proxima Relay system. There they found the Krell fleet, massive and intimidating but outnumbered. Enemy ships are moving to engage, called the tactical officer. Deploy by battle groups, Peterson ordered calmly. Activate Wright's targeting system. Across the human fleet, new sensor arrays came online, scanning for the unique signatures of Architect vessels. Among the massive enemy ships, 100 stood out. Larger, more organic in design, clearly command vessels. Targets acquired, the weapons officer reported. All ships, concentrate fire on designated targets, Peterson ordered. The human fleet opened fire as one. Energy beams and missiles streaked across space. The Architect vessels tried to retreat behind their screening ships, but Wright's targeting system maintained its lock. On the Vindicator's tactical display, Peterson watched as the first Architect ship's shields failed, then another, and another. Sir, we're receiving strange transmissions from the enemy fleet, the communications officer reported. Their combat coordination is breaking down. Commander Miller, coordinating with Voran rebels from her intelligence ship, confirmed it. Admiral, The Vorans say the architects control their subject species through direct neural links. When architect ships are destroyed, their forces lose cohesion. The battle raged for hours, but the outcome soon became clear. Without their commanders, the Krell forces fought poorly. Human ships took damage, but for every human vessel lost, dozens of enemy ships were destroyed. When the last architect vessel in the system exploded, the remaining Krell ships began to scatter, jumping away in all directions. Peterson watched them flee. Let them go. Let them tell their masters what happened here. The victory was decisive, but Peterson knew the war was far from over. Intelligence from their Voran allies indicated that the architects ruled an empire spanning hundreds of systems. They would not be defeated easily. But as Peterson looked at the production reports from human space, he allowed himself a small smile. 350,000 ships had just won a major victory, and the shipyards back home had already produced another 100,000, with more completed every day. The architects had destroyed one colony. They would soon face the full might of humanity's response. 3 years into the war, humanity's industrial might reached its full potential. Shipyards around every human-controlled planet and moon worked without pause. The gleaming hulls of new warships filled orbital construction docks from Mercury to the outer planets. Admiral Peterson stood before the massive window in his new command center on the moon. Earth hung in the black sky, beautiful and blue. Behind him, the War Council reviewed the latest production numbers. 700,000 ships, General Winters said, her voice filled with awe. If anyone had suggested this was possible 4 years ago, they would have been laughed out of the room. Peterson nodded. And every one of them equipped with Dr. Wright's targeting systems and enhanced shields. The door to the conference room slid open and Commander Susan Miller entered. 3 years of war had changed her. Her face was leaner, her eyes harder, but she carried herself with the confidence of a leader who had proven herself many times over. Commander, Peterson greeted her. How was your meeting with the Voran delegation? Productive, Susan replied, but I bring more than just Voran allies now. She activated the room's holographic projector. The image of an alien appeared, reptilian in appearance, with iridescent scales and 4 arms. This is Kral Thuk of the Saurians. Their homeworld has been under architect control for over 3 centuries. They've agreed to join our alliance. General Winters frowned. Can they be trusted? They've served the architects for a long time. The Saurians were the architects' main shipbuilders, Susan explained. They know the weaknesses of every Krell vessel design, and they hate their masters more than anyone. Peterson studied the alien image. What do they bring to the fight? 6 systems ready to rebel, 20,000 ships, and most importantly... Susan paused, her eyes gleaming. The location of the architect's main manufacturing hub. The room fell silent. For 3 years, they had searched for this target. You certain? Peterson asked quietly. Susan nodded. Zev from the Voran and Kralthuk confirmed it independently. The architects build their command ships at a place called Zeta Ontari. It's heavily defended, but if we destroy it, we cripple their ability to control their forces, Peterson finished. In his laboratory on Mars, Dr. Alan Wright supervised the final tests of his newest weapon. The laboratory had expanded into a massive complex employing thousands of scientists and engineers. Wright's original grief had hardened into determination that powered innovation after innovation. Begin the simulation, he ordered. On a large screen, a complex model showed a specialized energy beam striking an architect vessel. Instead of attempting to penetrate the ship's shields directly, the beam changed frequency rapidly, creating a resonance effect that disrupted the shields from within. Power efficiency is up 20% from the last test, reported his assistant. Alan nodded satisfied. Start production immediately. Priority installation on all ships heading to Zeta Ontari. Across human space and beyond, rebellion sparked among the architect's subject species. News of human victory spread from system to system, carried by daring pilots and hidden communication networks. Species that had served their masters for generations began to resist, sabotage, or openly rebel. On the jungle world of Terrace, the insectoid Zeltai destroyed 3 architect control centers in a single day. In the Procyon system, the aquatic, Mer cut off shipments of rare minerals essential for architect technology. Everywhere, the empire that had stood for millennia began to fracture. Commander Miller coordinated these rebellions from her new command ship, the Defiance. As she reviewed reports from a dozen worlds, her communications officer interrupted. "Commander, priority message from Admiral Peterson." Susan activated her screen. "Admiral?" Peterson's face appeared, grim but determined. "It's time, Commander. All forces are to converge on Zeta Ontari in 3 days. Can your allies be ready?" "They've been ready for centuries, sir. We'll be there." The largest human fleet ever assembled jumped into the Zeta Ontari system with precise coordination. 700,000 warships, accompanied by 30,000 vessels from allied species, appeared around the massive manufacturing hub of the Architect Empire. Admiral Peterson stood on the bridge of the Vindicator, now upgraded with every advanced technology developed during the war. The tactical display showed the target, a sprawling complex the size of a small moon surrounded by defensive platforms and patrol ships. "Enemy response?" he asked. "They're scrambling everything they have, Admiral," his tactical officer reported. "Sensors show approximately 150,000 ships moving to defensive positions." Peterson smiled thinly. "Begin the attack. All ships, advance by battle groups." The human fleet moved forward like a massive fist, punching through the outer defensive line. Thousands of energy beams lanced out, guided by Wright's targeting systems to find Architect command vessels with uncanny precision. On the Defiance, Susan coordinated with the Allied ships. "Foreign squadrons, target the communication arrays. Saurian forces, focus on the defensive platforms." The battle was fierce but one-sided. For every human ship lost, dozens of enemy vessels were destroyed. The Architect defenders fought with increasing desperation as the human fleet closed in on the manufacturing hub. Aboard the Vindicator, Peterson received an urgent communication. "Admiral, we're detecting unusual energy readings from the hub. They may be preparing to scuttle the facility. All ships, maximum fire on the hub's power centers," Peterson ordered. "We need those facilities intact." Dr. Wright, who had insisted on being present for this battle, studied the readings from his station. "Those aren't self-destruct preparations," he said suddenly. "They're powering up jump engines. They're trying to escape with the entire facility." "Can they do that?" Peterson demanded. "Not if we disrupt their power grid now," Wright replied. Peterson nodded. "All ships, new targeting priorities, focus fire on these coordinates." Human vessels redirected their attacks to the huge power conduits Wright had identified. Explosions rippled across the surface of the manufacturing hub. Inside, thousands of Architect workers and engineers rushed to evacuation ships as systems failed around them. After hours of intense fighting, the last defensive platform went dark. The manufacturing hub, though damaged, was largely intact and in human hands. Engineer teams from a dozen species began boarding the facility, securing areas and collecting invaluable technical data. On the bridge of the Vindicator, Admiral Peterson received the final reports. "Casualties? 12,000 ships lost, Admiral. Approximately 4 million personnel." Peterson closed his eyes briefly. Each loss was devastating, but the price had been worth paying. "And enemy losses?" "Total, sir. The facility is ours." NT. The days that followed, the true value of their victory became clear. The manufacturing hub contained not just production facilities, but design archives stretching back thousands of years. The technical knowledge of an entire empire was now in human hands. As Allied forces secured the system, a new message arrived from Earth. The President herself addressed Admiral Peterson. "The Architects have sent an envoy to Earth," she said. "They're requesting peace talks." Peterson's face showed no emotion. "And your response, Madam President?" "We told them that unconditional surrender is the only terms we'll accept. We're sending the envoy to you. The Architects created this war. It's fitting that you dictate the terms of their defeat. As the communication ended, Peterson looked out at the stars. A civilization that had dominated hundreds of worlds for millennia was now suing for peace, brought to its knees in just 4 years, all because they had destroyed one human colony. But the war wasn't over yet. Intelligence reports indicated that the architects were gathering their remaining forces for a last stand at their homeworld. It would be the final battle, and humanity was ready. The architect envoy stood in the center of the conference room aboard the Vindicator. It was the first time humans had seen one of the true Krell in person. The being was tall and slender with pale blue skin that seemed to shimmer slightly. Its 4 eyes blinked independently of each other, and 6-fingered hands gestured as it spoke through a translation device. "The High Council offers terms of peace," the envoy said. "We will withdraw from 20 border systems and provide compensation for your destroyed colony." Admiral Peterson looked at the alien with cold eyes. Around the table sat the War Council, along with representatives from a dozen formerly subjugated species. Commander Susan Miller watched the architect carefully, noting every movement and gesture for future intelligence analysis. "Those terms are unacceptable," Peterson said simply. "We demand unconditional surrender of all architect forces, immediate freedom for all conquered worlds, and the architect leadership to stand trial for war crimes." The envoy's skin darkened slightly, what Susan recognized as an expression of anger or fear. "Impossible. The architects have ruled for 10,000 years. We do not surrender." "Then we will meet at your homeworld," Peterson replied. "Your empire is finished. The only question is how many more of your people die before you accept it." After the envoy departed, Dr. Alan Wright approached Peterson. "Admiral, our intelligence sources indicate the architects have moved something called the Stellar Forge to their homeworld. The Saurians are very concerned about this." "What is it?" Peterson asked. "According to Kralthuk, it's a weapon capable of accelerating a star's fusion process to create a localized supernova. If we approach their homeworld, they could destroy our entire fleet, along with themselves." Peterson's face hardened. "They're willing to commit suicide rather than surrender. The architect ruling caste would rather die than live under someone else's authority," Commander Miller explained. "They've never experienced defeat. They don't know how to process it." "Then we need a way to neutralize this weapon before the main assault," Peterson decided. "Commander, assemble a special operations team. Dr. Wright, I need everything you can give them to counter this technology." For 2 weeks, Commander Miller trained with her team of humans and allied species experts. The Saurians provided detailed information about architect technology, while the Voran contributed specialists who understood the layout of architect facilities. The night before the mission, Susan stood in the observation deck of the Defiance looking out at the assembled fleet. Ships stretched as far as the eye could see, the combined might of humanity and their new allies, ready for the final push. "Quite a sight, isn't it?" Dr. Wright said, joining her at the window. Susan nodded. 4 years ago, I watched a single colony burn. Now we're about to end an empire that has stood for millennia. Do you think we'll succeed tomorrow? "We have to," she replied simply. "Everything depends on it." The next day, a small stealth ship slipped past the outer defenses of the architect homeworld. Aboard were Commander Miller, a team of Special Forces operators, and 3 alien allies, including Zev the Voran. Each person carried specialized equipment designed by Dr. Wright. Approaching the insertion point, the pilot reported quietly. "Ready in 30 seconds. Susan checked her equipment one last time. "Remember, our only objective is to disable the Stellar Forge. We don't engage enemy forces unless absolutely necessary." The team deployed from the ship, using thruster packs to guide themselves to an exhaust port on a massive facility that jutted from the planet's surface. Once inside, they moved quickly through maintenance tunnels, guided by Zev's knowledge of architecture. "The main control chamber should be ahead," Zev whispered. As they approached the chamber, alarms suddenly blared throughout the facility. A voice spoke in the architect language, harsh and commanding. They've detected the main fleet entering the system, Zev translated urgently. They're preparing to activate the weapon. Susan signaled her team forward. Move now. They burst into the control chamber, stunning the unprepared architect technicians before they could react. In the center of the room stood a glowing pillar of energy connected to numerous control stations. That's it, said Kralthuk, the Saurian engineer on their team. The Stellar Forge control matrix. Susan's team secured the room while Kralthuk worked to disable the weapon. Outside, through the chamber's massive viewport, they could see the human fleet arriving. Hundreds of thousands of ships appearing like stars suddenly blinking into existence. How much longer? Susan asked, watching as architect defense platforms began firing on the human vessels. Almost done, Kralthuk replied, his 4 hands working rapidly on different control panels. But there's a problem. They've locked out the main shutdown protocols. I can only delay the activation sequence, not stop it completely. Susan made a quick decision. Place Dr. Wright's devices around the control matrix. We'll destroy it manually. As the team planted the explosive devices, the facility shook from impacts. The battle outside was intensifying. Charges set, reported one of the human operators. 2-minute timer. Everyone back to the ship, Susan ordered. As her team retreated, she activated her communication link. Admiral Peterson, Stellar Forge will be neutralized in 2 minutes. Proceed with the main assault. Aboard the Vindicator, Peterson received her message with relief. All ships, advance by battle groups. Target enemy command centers and defensive platforms. The human fleet surged forward, unleashing a storm of energy weapons and missiles. The architect defenders fought desperately, but they were outnumbered and outgunned. Inside the facility, Susan's team raced back through the maintenance tunnels. When the explosives detonated, the entire structure shuddered violently. Support. Beams crashed down around them as they made their final sprint to the extraction point. Their ship detached from the facility just as secondary explosions began to tear it apart. As they pulled away, Susan looked back to see the massive Stellar Forge facility breaking into pieces, its central energy core flickering and dying. Mission accomplished, she reported. The battle for the architect homeworld raged for 3 days. When it ended, the once mighty rulers of a vast empire were reduced to a single planet with no defenses and no hope of victory. In the Grand Assembly Chamber of the Architect High Council, Admiral Peterson stood before the 7 surviving members of the ruling caste. Behind him were representatives from Earth and the 32 human colonies, alongside delegates from 24 formerly enslaved species. Your empire is ended, Peterson said simply. Your fleets are destroyed. Your subject worlds are free. These are our terms. You will never again build warships, develop weapons technology, or attempt to conquer other worlds. You will remain on this planet under the supervision of the new Galactic Alliance. The architect leader stared at him with all 4 eyes. And if we refuse? Then this planet joins New Eden in memory only, Peterson replied coldly. One by one, the Architect Council members pressed their hands to the surrender document. 10,000 years of dominion ended with a few simple gestures. 1 month later on Earth, a memorial was dedicated to the victims of New Eden Colony. Dr. Alan Wright stood among the dignitaries, watching as the eternal flame was lit to honor the 2,300,000 lives lost. Next to him, Commander Susan Miller and Admiral Peterson looked on silently. Their revenge had been complete, but the cost had been enormous. Was it worth it? Susan asked quietly. Peterson looked up at the stars, now safer for humanity than they had ever been before. Ask the 300 worlds that are free now. Ask the trillions who will never know architect rule. As night fell, the eternal flame burned bright against the darkness. 1 colony had been destroyed, but in its destruction, the balance of power in the galaxy had shifted forever. Humanity had arrived on the galactic stage not as explorers or traders, but as liberators and warriors, a force that would never again be underestimated by any species among the stars. And far above, in orbit, the first ships of the new galactic peace fleet, built from converted warships, prepared to depart on their maiden voyage. Their mission was no longer war, but ensuring that what happened to New Eden would never happen to any world again.